Welcome back to another episode of the Supply Chaney podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Chaney, and we're going to do kind of what we do every day, which is talk to people throughout the supply chain industry, the movers and shakers, the folks that are making the technology, that are running operations, or maybe even just folks starting out their career. And we're hearing kind of what drove them to go get into the supply chain industry. Well, today we're going to talk about robots, and we're going to talk about them with one of the experts in the space, Michael Chen, the co-founder and CEO of Yondu AI. I've been fans of theirs. I've been a fan. I guess I cannot be multiple fans, but I've been a fan of theirs for a while and watching them. And we run into each other at a number of shows, as tends to happen. And this is really like a treat for me because I really like to talk to the people who are building things and to hear what drove them to do this craziness of being an entrepreneur. And then, of course, with this particular episode, we're going to mix in some technology and robotics and warehouses and all the above. So, with that said, Michael, can you take a minute to just do a quick overview about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Hello, everybody. I'm Michael. I'm the CEO and the co-founder of Yondu AI. We are a general purpose robotics company. So we're deploying these robots to help automate really manual and repetitive tasks within your warehouse, things like picking, packing, unboxing. And we're doing all these with these cutting edge AI models that allow the robots to be pretty much fully autonomous.
I'm interested in diving into that a little bit more, but before we unpack that more, let's talk a little about Michael, the younger version of yourself. Tell me a little bit about your upbringing. Where are you from? What was your family dynamics like? And kind of like what were you as a kid?
Yeah, definitely. So I come from a family of first generation immigrants. Both my mother and my father both immigrated from China to the United States to pursue a better career. They were both in the restaurant industry, so they have a Chinese takeout restaurant where they work to this day in a very small town in a rural part of Florida. So I'm not a big city kid. I actually grew up in rural Florida in a really small town called Green Cove Springs. And a big part of my childhood was actually working at my parents' Chinese takeout restaurant. So I would be there pretty much ever since my head could stick over the counter, taking orders, working the fry cook, cooking, doing pretty much every position, sweeping the floors, everything that I could. And, to be honest, it wasn't an easy task. I mean, it wasn't just me, it was my whole family, my aunt, my grandma, my brother, my parents. Everyone was pretty much breaking their back every single day just to put food on the table. It was not an easy business. And, the conditions weren't very good either. It was always super hot. And I was always working hard every single day, pretty much going straight from school to work, working throughout the summers. And I think that experience played a big role in shaping who I am today. Not only introducing me to the business side, the entrepreneurship side of life, but also dealing with the incredible stress and the customer facing portion of running a business. And probably most importantly, giving me interest in making physical labor more easy and making people's lives easier through robotics. Another part of my life growing up was building things. So I was always a super hands-on guy. I was always building crazy inventions and contraptions in my garage at home. And a big part of that was motivated by just solving problems around me. So one of the biggest things I wanted to do was help out my parents and my whole family at the restaurant. So when I was a kid, I would actually build machines to help them around the restaurant. So things like an automatic sauce filling machine or a robot hostess that would go around and take people to their tables. And not only that, but I would build all sorts of crazy stuff. And a lot of it was centered around how can I help people's lives be easier? How can I reduce the amount of work that people have to do? And that's still my passion to this day. Like I've seen how incredibly difficult people have to work just to make a living. And I want to make that process easier through my interest, which is robotics and building things. I carried out that interest pretty much my entire life throughout high school into college. I did come from a small town, so I was actually the first person from my entire county to go to MIT, where I continued to study robotics. I was fortunate enough to get introduced to a lab at MIT called CSAIL, which is MIT's AI and computer science lab. It's one of the biggest on campus. And I got the opportunity to lead a team to build one of the first open source walking robots from scratch, pretty much. We went through 7 design iterations, and it was my first introduction into general purpose robots. And the experience of building this, it really showed me that this is the future, that robots are going to be general purpose, not just tied to one particular application. And around that same time, I did a really interesting internship, which was at a company called ARA. And it was based out of West Virginia. So I was at this internship building, honestly, really boring stuff. So in my free time, I decided to start experimenting, and I actually built one of the first robots that you could control with your voice. So it was right around when ChatGPT came out. It was in early 2023, and I connected ChatGPT with a robot, and I was able to get it to do things using voice commands. And that completely blew my mind, so much so that I ended up proposing this idea to the company and then getting all the interns at the company to work on that project and then getting funding from the CEO of the company to build out this project internally. And as you can imagine, when I got back to campus at MIT, I could not stop thinking about just intelligent robots and what they could do for the world. And that was kind of my 4 year introduction into what we're doing today.
Wow. Wow, that's Michael, I've known you a good bit now, and it's so amazing to hear those stories of growing up and what inspires people and where people kind of got their start in life. And as a person from a small town here in Texas and growing up on the farm and mowing yards and cleaning fence lines and throwing hay bales and all this sort of, and then one of my very first jobs was being a waiter as
Wow.
well. And so I always I'm a big champion of everyone should spend some time in the hospitality industry, just one, so you can be a little more sympathetic and empathetic to the folks that are providing services to you, wherever you
Mhm.
are in the world. But just so you can appreciate, that it takes all kinds of us to make the world go round, and everyone plays a role. And to hear that you've definitely gotten your fair share of grease stains and burns and all that sort of stuff. I imagine it just helps me to understand that you aren't just this Michael the robotics guy, right? Like that
Yeah.
it's so amazing to have so much more context around people's stories. I'm curious about you had this entrepreneurial sort of influence, although it was in the restaurant industry. um, why not stick in the restaurant industry? Like you kind of have gone, I guess I see you a lot, in the supply chain circles and
Mhm.
whatnot. But do you still kind of have some ideas or concepts of playing and having an impact in the restaurant business?
Yeah. We saw this company that we're building not to be just a logistics company, but to be a truly general purpose robotics company. And our mission is to help automate the most manual and repetitive, tiring work, not just within warehouses, but outside those 4 walls into retail, into hospitality, into restaurants. And for us, it was about finding the right place to start because technology is this type of technology is going to be applied everywhere. But where it starts is extremely important because it defines how quickly you can deploy, how quickly you can get your technology into the world. And for us, it's really important that we grow as quickly as possible and we become that trusted name within logistics so that we can use this and expand to help other industries as well. So we have every intention to go back and start impacting the restaurants, the hotels, like every industry. And we see logistics as our place to start because logistics, specifically warehouses, the environment is a little bit more controlled. You have flat floors, you have more control of the environment, and you have this small set of tasks that are common around every single warehouse. Whereas in a restaurant environment, you have the chaoticness of the kitchen. Every place is going to be different. You have to work alongside waiters and people and the chaos and commotion. So if you look at it from that more technical lens, you'll see why we chose to start with logistics instead of maybe industries where you'd have to work more closely to people.
You know, when you were saying all that, I was just thinking about, like, the fully autonomous McDonald's, I think that I've seen. There's the,
Yeah.
fully the robot
Mhm.
bars and baristas and stuff. So to some degree, you can, if you kinda shrink down the footprint and the scale of an operation, it seems like it is quite achievable to go lights out, in like a
Yeah,
food production type of environment.
definitely, definitely.
Um, but what you were describing a while ago when you were saying about the hooking up ChatGPT to a robot and stuff, give me a little education and maybe for our
Yeah.
audience. But I think the concept of physical AI is
Mhm.
kind of a word. We're all saying AI all the time, but I think there's only a much smaller amount of people out there that are aware of physical AI. And is what you did an example of that? And can you give us a quick primer?
Yeah, definitely. I would like to say that physical AI is wildly overused today, and I would classify it as this new generation of AI-powered robots and not the previous generation, I would say, which I would separate into classical robotics and then physical AI, being robots that are able to do more than just the task they're pre-programmed to do, robots that are able to generalize and robots that are able to leverage foundation models in order to do more. So, yes, that example of that early project would be considered physical AI because you can tell the robot what to do and it can do a wide variety of tasks. That's kind of what we're trying to do today, where we have a step up from that. We have a robot foundation model that we can use to train the robot to do a wide variety of tasks like picking, packing, stocking, decanting, and the ability to train the robot to do a wide variety of tasks, not within a very constrained environment, but within disorganized, brownfield, messy environments. That is really the potential of this technology. And it's extremely exciting because, in the past, over 90% of warehouses have no automation at all. And one of the big reasons why is because the automation has been extremely capital intensive because you have to change the infrastructure, because you have to, have these programmers come in and specifically program this specific application on your robot. But that all changed about a year ago when a lot of this AI technology and these robots started coming out because now you can deploy a robot into a warehouse. It can be a, totally unique environment and it can adapt to different situations and you can plug it into environments designed for people. And that is the reason why we're going to see like a huge revolution, especially within the SMB and the medium large space.
You know, I've been kind of debating in my head while we've been talking, asking you this question or not, because it's going to be a little bit on the spot. But
Yeah.
I think that you will have one of the clearest perspectives to answer it. And it is,
Mhm.
there are these concerns that if there's robots that are all able to do the dull, dangerous, and dirty jobs that there are in the world, to take people out of the hot fry kitchens and out of dangerous containers, unloading stuff, those jobs do account for, I don't know, call it 20% of all the jobs in the labor force, right? And so, by building the technology that eliminates the need for people to do those jobs, that is great in and of itself. But it also makes a certain, those jobs no longer relevant. So, kind of like, how do you talk and what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, the reason why we started this company is because we want to play a role in influencing how this technology is rolled out. If you consider what's happening right now as almost like an industrial revolution, just like some of the previous ones we've had in the past, you can kind of look to history and see how you anticipate times like this playing out. Where I think the closest parallel was in the automotive world, where they started widely adopting industrial robot arms for manufacturing cars like 2 decades plus ago. And it wildly impacted the workers that were on the assembly line every single day manufacturing cars by hand. I mean, this had a huge impact on the labor force. And by no means did it was a gentle, right? Like a lot of people's jobs were displaced. A lot of people that were doing a lot of these dangerous, dull, dirty tasks in the plants, they were left out of a job. But what people often miss is that at the same time, tens of thousands of new jobs were created around maintaining those machines, installing them, programming them, ensuring safety, and being the overseer on the floor, right? There was so many new jobs that were higher skilled, easier on folks that were created as a result of these robots being installed. And that's how we see this next evolution, this phase playing out. And our role as a company is really to make sure that the transitionary process is as gentle as possible, right? Like at the end of the day, it's up to our clients to determine how they use the technology, but we also play a role in impacting the use of this technology responsibly and trying to ensure that the way it impacts people's lives is, as less in the least damaging way possible, right? That's, part of our responsibility as a company. But that's how I see it playing out. That kind of like how industrial arms impacted the workforce in the past, we'll see that with general purpose robotics in the present. Yes, it will most likely displace some of the jobs, but it'll create new, exciting jobs that will be more cognitive, less backbreaking, and less tiring for the general workforce.
I'm curious your thoughts, you know, like, because you said this is something that we, you know, at Yondu care about and we want to be intentional and strategic
Hmm.
about it. But, you know, it's not just you all, and there's
Exactly.
governments and there's entire, you know, the entire world kind of has a responsibility to think about how does this get adopted. And you and one or two companies alone cannot really shift and set the paradigm, I guess, that's following it. So there needs to be some legislation, some sort of like, you know, policies that are kind of put in to help foster, to educate the next wave of those engineers to what are you kind of seeing along those lines of preparing the workforce for this kind of robotic revolution?
Yeah, I would say that there's not nearly enough happening on the legislative level, on the government scale. We need to have laws in place that kind of define how this transitionary period happens to protect workers in order to, create laws in place that help ease the transitionary period. I think that there isn't enough being done right now, and that companies like ours should push for changes to be made. That being said, at our scale right now, kind of like since we're just getting started, we don't necessarily have the finances or the ability to make that impact right now. And what we do have control over is our immediate deployments, like how we choose to deploy the technology, how we choose to impact the workforces in which we are being deployed in. And that's where we'll probably see ourselves making the most impact right now. That being said, as we grow, as we expand nationwide and across hundreds and thousands of warehouses, will have more and more impact and ability to have decision-making power and impact on the legislative process. And I think, and I hope that as that politicians see this process as not something that'll happen slowly, but something that'll happen really rapidly, just because of the incredible pace that the technology is developing.
We're probably kind of seeing that with general AI in
Yes.
general, which is that, you know, the technology is far outpacing kind of how quickly legislation
Hmm.
can move.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'll kind of be standing on the sidelines watching and doing whatever I can to help out, just, you
Hmm.
know, from my microphone over here. Um, I'm curious, you know, we've talked a good a bit about engineering and robotics and that sort of thing, but the truth is, like, you've built a business now around this, and having a mechanical engineering degree is one thing, but having a business degree and learning how to go sell and pitch and raise money and all this sort of stuff is an entirely different discipline. I'm kind of curious how you are coping with that, or how you're kind of working on the business front. You know, mentorships or folks that are helpful to you to help on the business front.
Yeah, definitely. So when we decided to start this company pretty much right out of college, we knew we were entering in an industry that was relatively foreign to me and my co-founder Tamid when we started this company. we wanted to make sure we learned as much about the industry as possible and that we approached the business side really carefully. So what we did was we actually applied for an accelerator program called Y Combinator. So if you haven't heard of it, it's one of the top accelerator programs to help educate and fund companies at a really early stage. We had to move out to San Francisco in order to be a part of this program. But what it taught us was how to find the initial customers, how to do the fundraise, how to talk and really understand the pains in which you can help solve in the industry. It really taught us to focus on customer needs rather than build something and then apply it to a customer need, right? It's really starting with the pain points of a client rather than making assumptions. And that was like the key strategy that Y Combinator taught us. It made raising our seed round as a company when we left the program much easier because we had the ability to be a part of that network, to have connections, and the I would say hype around our company going into the demo day or like the final day of Y Combinator allowed us to pretty easily raise a nice sized seed round, which has helped fund our initial deployments and all the research that we've been doing.
I like it. I like it. Not the first time I've learned and had a Y Combinator alumni on. Um, I'm curious from the sort of what happens next piece. So you kind of gone out, you had the idea, you went through YC, you got out of there, you had some seed. Who are you targeting? Like, what right now is your ideal customer profile? Like, who's that partner or that customer that you're looking for today?
Yeah. When we found our first customer, it was incredibly natural, incredibly organic because we actually posted videos of our robot working online and a warehouse owner reached out to us. It was pretty interesting. It was a 3PL owner working the e-commerce space and he actually saw our robots and was like, "Hey, can we use this technology to help automate our bin picking in our warehouses?" And as we learned more about this process, we became more and more invested. They introduced us to their friends introduced us to their friends. And that's how we built our network in the logistics space, literally through introductions and warm introductions from 3PL owners. That's really where our ICP started developing. It is the 3PLs, the SMBs to large warehouse clients that focus on direct to consumer e-commerce and specifically small, lightweight items. That's really our target audience. And it's influenced our initial pilots as well. We work with Shipbots in LA. They're medium large size 3PL that's focused primarily on e-commerce D2C items. And we've also worked with some other 3PLs in the area. And we're rapidly expanding. We have 7 deployments that we're working on right now, and our next 15 lined up. So we have our hands full. And as word has gone out about our capabilities across pick and pack and stocking, we've gotten interest outside of logistics, actually. Already we have 2 tier 1 automotive clients that are Fortune 500 global companies that just through inbound have started working with us on paid POCs. We have major automobile manufacturers that have reached out asking if we can help automate some tasks. So the capabilities of the technology that we're building are really far reaching, but we're staying true to our logistics roots and focusing on servicing 3PLs as our primary client.
Okay, nice. Congratulations.
Thank
Um,
you.
I'm curious from a, if we're kind of talking to those 3PL owner operators out there, how do you work through kind of the economics of, you've got X number of people out there and you can accentuate or facilitate, add in some robots and whatnot. How do you kind of talk about the economics of that with an existing workforce?
Yeah. When we talk to a warehouse owner, one of the biggest pains they tell us about is that they are frustrated with existing automation solutions. And that's perfectly reasonable. A lot of the automation solutions like ASRS, for example, AMRs, they either fall on one end or the other end of the price ROI spectrum in the sense that they're usually either too expensive or, it takes too long to get an ROI On the other end, it doesn't fully automate the task they're trying to accomplish, and they end up being really frustrated and investing in, maybe small fixes, like little small tiny improvements. But what we're providing and what we're proposing is basically a solution that will enable you to have a really rapid return on investment while providing a full automation. So for our mobile bin picking operation, for example, we allow a 3PL to fully automate their picking process, but at the same time get a return on investment really quickly. They can, for example, deploy one robot, test it out, within a month, get a return on investment. They can evaluate whether they want to expand and then slowly start adding additional robots on. So that slow rollout is really appealing to 3PLs, which, a lot of times are based on contracts, right? They can't wait 5 to 10 years to get a return on investment. They have to get a return on investment within their contract cycle with their clients. So we're really cognizant of that. And that's why we typically operate on a financing model where we charge the client, a few $1,000s per month per robot so that the client can really quickly test it out and get a return on investment.
I see. I see. Let's talk about. I think one of the things that a lot of people talk about when they see robots and whatnot is why do they look like humans
Mhm.
and why do some have legs and some don't have legs? And I think this is a perfect question for you because you mentioned earlier that one of your very first things you ever did was kind of like a humanoid walking robot.
Mhm.
So just kind of like talk through a little bit of like why sometimes the design choices are made in different sort of looks and whatnot. Are used.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody, when they imagine robot, the first thing that comes in their mind is a fully humanoid robot with legs and arms and everything. That's not necessarily the best form factor for a warehouse. In our mind at Yondu, we envision a future where there will be general purpose robots in the sense that you will have a robot that can do multiple tasks. And the reason why that will happen is that's kind of necessary in order to reach what we call economies of scale, as well as be able to operate within the same environments that people work in. So when you start thinking about the requirements people have for particular tasks, let's say bin picking or packing, for example, you start to say, hey, maybe I need two arms, maybe I do need a torso, maybe I need a wheelbase, whatever. You start ending up getting closer and closer to a robot that does end up looking like a person. That being said, that's not going to be the best form factor for every application. So at Yondu, we propose that there are a few different form factors, some of which are more suitable for particular applications. And we rely on being the brains to power all of these different robots to do different tasks around your facility. So we work with a variety of manufacturers to find the best robot for your application and to create the AI to power it and do a task autonomously within your facility. So that's what makes us unique. Instead of actually building each robot and focusing on only one solution, we actually work with several different manufacturers, which might have, slightly different hardware configurations in order to get the best one for your use case. If you're in automotive, you have different cycle times that you need than logistics, right? You need it to run for a longer period of time. Maybe it can be tethered, right? Like maybe you need to have different motors that are more robust. So depending on your use case and your budget, we can help choose the best robot for you and focus on just providing the best autonomy and deployment service.
All right, I gotcha. Different arms for different purposes then.
Yes, exactly.
I'm curious then, like kind of as we wrap things up a little bit, if
Mhm.
you've got any words of wisdom for others that are building things, I think that there seems to be maybe it's just because I've been hanging out with a lot of founders and people that are creative and building things and solving problems, but just words of wisdom for those other folks that are out there building, trying to put together AI solutions or automation solutions for this industry.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is to just keep going, right? There's often times where you'll feel like you hit a wall where, this is a tough industry. You have to build trust. You have to develop a solution and demonstrate that it works over a long period of time. And the sales cycles can be long, but if you do it for long enough and you have a good solution, if you put your head down and you just build and you continue talking to customers, you'll reach a point where everything just clicks and it can happen in the blink of an eye. So just don't give up, keep going, things will work out.
Awesome. Hey, well, thank you for coming on and spending some time. It was probably well past due us having this conversation and making it podcast official. But any sort of like last words of wisdom or thoughts you want to make sure that our audience hears before we hang it up for this episode?
Yeah, I mean, nothing else really. I just really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me. And if anyone is interested in finding out more, you can reach out on my LinkedIn or on our website and contact us. And we're always happy to have a conversation.
Sweet. All right, man. I'll see you around out there somewhere in the industry soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nathan. Bye.
See ya.